There is one artifact in TFT right now that is responsible for so many interactions that I wouldn't be surprised if Riot decides to remove it. I am talking, of course, about the Suspicious Trenchcoat, one of the new artifacts that joined in set 11. It quickly became infamous for being broken on bruisers because the copies ran around with way too much HP. In this video, I want to go over all of the interesting code interactions, including how it interacts with shapeshifters. But before we get started, I'm still trying to catch up to Frozen's subscriber count by the end of the set. Why not subscribe and learn about cool and amazing techs like blocking off your Talisman Elise carry with the help of a Yuumi. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much for your support. Let's get started with the video. The Suspicious Trenchcoat can be quite overwhelming due to the sheer amount of interactions, so let's start off with something very simple: completed items. When a unit with a completed item splits into 3 copies, the copies will retain the same items as the original, but there are still quite a few differences. For starters, HP items like Vamox will increase the HP of the original unit, and since the copies take 1/3 of that, they will also end up with slightly more HP as well. However, they won't receive the 600 flat HP bonus from Vamox, and they won't benefit from the 12% max HP bonus either. Active items, on the other hand, are a bit more useful. Anything that has a proc effect like Redemption, Edge of Night or Protector's Vow will still function after the split. In fact, mana items like Protector's Vow are extremely useful because the copies have the same starting mana as the original. Since the copies are rather squishy, it can be quite hard for them to cast their ability before they're taken out. Another interaction worth mentioning has to do with Ionic Spark and Bramble Vest. These two items have new augments based around them called High Voltage and Thorn Plated Armor. Especially High Voltage is a very powerful augment. You want to combine this with a Suspicious Code to create more Ionic Sparks during combat, all of them buffed by the augment. This will massively increase your damage and is definitely a combo worth trying out at least once. Outside of normal items, you can also do a lot of shenanigans with support and artifact items. Moonstone, Large Gem or even the new Spite are all great options to combine with the code to make your team stronger. Arguably one of the greatest support items to couple with the code is the Unstable Treasure Chest. In fact, this combo was so broken that Riot had to change the Dark LED Links augment and replace the treasure chest with a Trickster's Glass. I want to make one honorable mention for the item Randuin's Omen. I showcased a special interaction last set already, and this has not been fixed yet. For some reason, Randuins will activate the effect again when the copies spawn. This can potentially create incredibly tanky units if the spawns are close to your front line. I'm not sure how much longer this combo will be around if I keep pushing it into the limelight. As for other artifacts, there are actually a lot less interactions than you would think. The best combination by far was with Diamond Hands, allowing you to farm 4 gold every single round while also blocking a ton of damage. But this interaction was deemed too powerful and ended up getting removed during the PBE cycle of set 12. Technically, Moguls could work as a replacement, but reaching max stacks with a bunch of low HP units is quite difficult. Zhonya's Hourglass is also a good option, but probably the most interesting combination is with the Talisman of Ascension. The Talisman is an incredibly powerful artifact that grants the holder 100% more max health and 120% damage amp after 20 seconds into the fight. The trick is usually to corner the unit with the Talisman in late game to ensure that it stays alive and have the unit clean up the enemy board once the unit ascends. Now you might wonder how the Talisman interacts with the code, and the answer is, yeah, it's pretty good. The Talisman on the copies simply checks for the fight timer, meaning if the initial 20 seconds have already passed, then all of the copies can instantly ascend the moment they spawn. If you can get this to work, you definitely have one of the most powerful combat setups at your disposal. Outside of items, we also have to talk about augments. I already mentioned the interaction with High Voltage, but this is not your only option. For example, the new augment Combat Bandages works great together with the code because all of the copies will heal themselves once they drop low enough. My favorite combination is with Raid Boss. This augment grants armor and MR to your strongest Bastion unit every time another Bastion on your board dies. This is usually combined with the Poppy or Nunu hero augment, creating an unkillable monster that is almost impossible to deal with. The code works great here because you create 3 additional Bastion units that all benefit from the trait and also buff your raid boss even further. If you're playing raid boss, you definitely want to look out for these surprise charms that grant you 1 or 2 codes for 1 combat. Finally, let's go over traits. I already covered this in a short, but in case you missed it, Suspicious Trenchcoat is quite overpowered in combination with the Arcana trait. You can give a unit a code with 2 emblems, and after they split, you now have 6 emblems that all increase the damage amp for the rest of combat. I'd be very surprised if this interaction stays around for long, since this doesn't feel very intended. Outside of Arcana, are there any other traits we can use? I did check Portal, thinking that maybe the units spawn with a shield similar to Fated with Yasuo in set 11, but it doesn't look like this one is going to work. One of the more interesting ones is Honeymancy, because all of the copies spawn with their own set of bees that they can transfer after they perish. Sadly, Honey is not in the best spot right now, unless you end up with a Blitzcrank hero augment, or maybe you watch this in the future when Honeymancy was overbuffed, and then this might be something worth aiming for. I also had the idea to create copies of the fairy items like the fairy crown and the Queen's Guard armor, but this didn't exactly work either. While you can copy the fairy items, they don't appear to function. The new crowns don't stack, so it's not possible for the copies to gain any damage amp, and it doesn't look like the copies with Queen's Guard armor get healed from the fairy crown holder. This strategy appears to be a bust. The final part of this video is a highly requested topic, but it can also be quite difficult to understand. How do shapeshifters work with the Suspicious Trenchcoat? The best way to understand this is to go over some examples. Let's start with a very easy one. You have an Elise 1-star with a code and nothing else. She has 650 base HP, gets plus 100 HP from the code for a total of 750. When she splits apart, every copy has 248 HP. Every copy is supposed to have 33% HP of the original, which means so far everything is working as intended. Next up, we have an Elise 2-star with a code, a Giant's Belt and 2 shapeshifters. She has 1170 base HP, gets plus 100 from the code and plus 150 from the belt for a total of 1420. This flat amount now gets enhanced by another 10% because of shapeshifter, putting her final HP at 1563. This 10% bonus is tripled after the first cast, so we have to add another 426 for a maximum HP of 1846. She splits apart towards the end of the fight, and we can see that each copy has a total of 516 HP. Now, how did this number come to be? The answer is quite simple. While the copies always take the original HP into account, only the HP value at the combat start is relevant. This also means that you never have to worry about losing HP. If your shapeshifter splits before ulting, it will not make a difference at all. In the next example, we have an Elise 3-star with a code, a Vamox armor and 2 shapeshifters. She has a base HP of 2106 plus 100 from the code and 600 from Vamox for a total flat value of 2806. Now she gets an additional 336 from the Vamox passive and an additional 280 from the shapeshifter trait. Keep in mind that all percentages don't scale off each other, they are always calculated based on the total flat HP and then added together. The Elise splits apart and we can see she has 1130 HP. This tells us again that the copies have 1/3 of the HP from combat start, but what happens if the copies cast as well? Now we can see a value of 1691. This is a very interesting number because it means that the shapeshifter bonus did in fact triple, and also that the value comes from the original Elise. The shapeshifter bonus was 280.6 HP, and this is the value that was tripled, resulting in more HP than expected. In short, this means that all HP items and multipliers are relevant to spawn the copy with a higher base HP, and if a copy ults, then the original shapeshifter value is tripled. One final example I do want to highlight is with Sterak's, because it grants a 25% HP buff that can activate both for the original and for the copies. Thankfully, the math here is consistent. While the Sterak proc will increase the HP of the original during combat, this does not cause the copies to spawn with more HP as well. Their HP is still based on the combat start HP with the initial shapeshifter buff. However, The Sterak proc for the copies works the same way as the Shapeshifter trait, meaning you get a 25% HP buff based on the original values. In this fight, you can see how this Elise copy goes from 1041 to 2344 after both Steraks proc and ends up with 3439 HP because the Shapeshifter buff gets tripled after the cast. To summarize, Shapeshifters are quite good at utilizing the Suspicious Trenchcoat because the values of the copies are based off the original, granting them higher HP values they wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. This more or less covers everything I wanted to talk about. Do you know about any super cool interactions that I didn't mention yet? Let me know in the comments. I hope you learned something and see you next time.